Hi, everyone. It's Henry DeVries with Indie Books International. Welcome to the Marketing with a Book podcast. It's our tradition to start our podcast with our author roll call, those who are with us today. And Gregg, that'll include you too, to just first introduce yourself with your name and the title of your book. And then if you want to give us a line or two about what the book's about, that would be great. Gregg's our special guest today, but we'll start off with Gregg and then hear from David and Mary.
Thank you, Henry. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I'm Gregg Ward, and I'm the author of a book called The Respectful Leader: 7 Ways to Influence Without Intimidation. It is a business fable, thanks to your coaching, Henry. And I'm very glad it is. It is a story based upon all of the different clients I've had over the years. It's very much in the genre of Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a realistic company with realistic characters and situations, and was brought out by John Wiley in 2016. And it's been great. I'm super proud.
Well, Gregg, we're so glad you're here. We're going to look forward to hearing more from you. David, why don't you introduce your book and your work?
Thanks, Henry. Hi, I'm David Goldman. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I wrote a book called The Road to Happiness: How to Get What You Really Want. And it's a book that has 9 stories in it of people that hired me. And when they hired me, they wanted something in particular, but along the way, they found that they were what they were really looking for. And thank you, Henry. With your help, it's become one of my favorite things.
Well, David, we always say to people, your story matters, and your stories certainly mattered in that book to those people. And we like to call it the mess to success formula. And there's just some nice stories that people can remember and hang on to, and take something away to improve their lives. So truly. And we're looking forward to your new book. So I always say a thought leader is not one and done, David. Thought leaders got more to share, and I know you have more to share. So
I'm actually writing it, Henry. So
good job.
There you go.
Mary Schmid. Mary, share with us, please.
Yes, hello, I'm Mary Schmid. My book is Make or Break Conversations: How Smart Financial Professionals Land New Clients and Keep Them for Life. The content of the book is based on the neuroscience of conversation, what goes on in our brain so we can lead meaningful conversations that build high trust relationships.
Thank you very much. When I met you, I just knew your work was very important. It was a noble work. It was getting people who talk about numbers to think about people when they talk to people. Not someone who was Mary trained, someone else I talked to. They were wanting to do a book, and I said, well, tell me a story about someone you helped. And they said, well, one day this portfolio walked into our office, and the portfolio was totally upside down, too much in equities, and it should have diversified, and then got hit with the recession of 2008, and the portfolio was reeling and had lost half its value. I said, excuse me, does this portfolio have a name? They couldn't even remember the name.
But remember the name because the numbers rule, but we know that's true. Yeah,
absolutely. So you're doing the Lord's work there.
Thank you for helping me craft it in a way that is reaching people, and they're getting to understand that it's the people side of the business and the communication skills, that there's science behind that we can all develop and learn from. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Chris, we're doing the author roll call. Would you like to introduce your book?
Sure. Sorry for the tech problems. My name is Christopher Hodges. I'm the author of Noble Automation Now: How to Improve Profit, Innovation, and Loyalty with Intelligent Automation.
We've got time today. Just tell us a little more about your book concept.
Oh, me personally? Okay.
Yep, you.
The problem facing the world is that automation is in equal parts super exciting and super scary. And many people see automation as a way to eliminate jobs. But what I have found through many senior executive examples in consulting is that automation is really a way to free resources to do more innovative and growth-oriented things. So the whole focus of my book is to help people through what I've seen and the clients I've interviewed see that automation can be super sexy and take all the drudgery and mundane, horrible stuff away from people's jobs. And what I say partly in the book, help them be heroes. So how can a human being be more of a human being and do more exciting things? That's the premise.
So Woody Allen in his nightclub act said that his father was replaced by a robot at work. The robot could do everything his father could do and better. And his mother asked the company if she could buy an extra one. So there we go. So there's a lot of jokes about automation not being noble or good. Maybe it was the way I told it. Okay, thanks, authors. Gregg Ward and I, gosh, Greg, we must go back 10, 15 years that we've been fans of each other's work. I've certainly been a fan of yours and what you do. I'm going to read your bio because it's so good, the one you sent, but Gregg came out of the world of theater, of all things, coming out of theater and actually helping companies be more respectful. Gregg says he's lived 4 lives. The first, he was a professional theater actor and then a director. So he knows that world. Hi diddle-dee-dee, an actor's life for me. Okay, then a specialist trainer for the New York Police Department. If you think of respectful culture, New York Police Department, this doesn't necessarily go together, but Gregg was helping that happen. Third, he was a freelance journalist and on assignment throughout Europe, so he's lived that life. And now he's a best-selling, award-winning author, speaker, consultant, coach. Yeah, he's a quadruple threat. He's also the founder and executive director of the Center for Respectful Leadership. In his spare time, on a personal note, in his spare time, Gregg is a Little League umpire, and he's found that the children on the field usually behave like little respectful adults, and the adults up in the stands sometimes behave like big disrespectful children. It reminds me of a favorite cartoon. It's a Little League game. The catcher has come out to talk to the pitcher on the mound, and the pitcher says, "That woman yelling, stick it in his ear. That's mother." So, okay, with that, I wanted to welcome Gregg. Please, Gregg, typically we have you talk for 15 minutes or so. And then I'm happy to ask you questions to bring it along, but however you like to proceed, the floor is yours. The talking stick is yours, Gregg Ward. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm reminded of the rain stick that we used to have in church school when you pass around the rain stick with and that was the talking stick for us.
Yeah,
so
yes,
it was kind of cool. So thank you very much. As you told people about, I've had this kind of weird circuitous life, and people often have said to me, well, how the heck did you get from theater to where you are now? I mean, I don't quite get it. And I must admit, I was somewhat surprised myself as I found myself in the middle of it, but it does go back to something that happened to me fairly early on in my theater career, where I realized that people in the theater business, and I was doing almost all theater. I did a little television, a little film, but I was really a theater guy. We don't necessarily get respect. We get, on occasion, adulation. We get a lot of criticism, and we don't necessarily get respect. So that became pretty clear to me early on. And then one day I fell into a job with the New York City Police Department. I was literally working, starving artist in New York City, literally just working in offices. And I was working at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. in the Dean for Special Programs office. And he came to me, he said, look, we want to do this training for cops on how to manage what they call EDPs, emotionally disturbed persons. And we think we should use professional actors to play these characters and have them what we now call experiential learning, because everyone hates the term role play. But we want these cops to role play with professional actors playing schizophrenics, homeless people who have gone off their medications, suicidal people, and so on and so forth. And can you do that? And, you know, being young and stupid, I said, of course, no problem. Got it. And I set about working with police psychologists, a hostage negotiation team, and a whole bunch of really top experts who fed me the information and fed me the content and the stories of real cases that they dealt with. And I hired actors and trained them. And we did the program, and it went, I got to be honest, nobody expected it to go as well as it did. No, we expected these hard-bitten New York City cops to just, like, you know, turn up their nose at this thing, but it really made a difference. And there was one key vignette or scene that we had created, starring an excellent actress who I'd cast, who was portraying someone who was suicidal, who was going to step on the third rail down in the subway. And she was so convincing that we had cops crying in the classroom. We had cops crying in the classroom. And so marketing at 1PP, One Police Plaza, said, ooh, we got cops crying in a training program. Okay. So they did a big press release. All of a sudden, CNN shows up, New York Times, a local station called New York One, the big news station. They all come and do this big stories on us, and suddenly we're national news. And it was then that I realized that my art form, my art for art's sake, acting, directing, theater kind of thing, actually could make a significant difference in people's lives. And part of it had to do with storytelling. You tell the story the right way and you're going to touch people. And that was, for me, that it was kind of eye-opening. I never realized it. I didn't know. And that program went for 2 years. And it was super successful. And then, of course, the funding ran out, and that was that. But at the end of the day, that got me kicked off really back in the 1980s into what I still do now is I use storytelling using professional actors or myself. I do a lot of storytelling when I keynote and train and speak. Storytelling is a way to touch people, touch their hearts, touch their lives in a way that goes through the head and into the heart. And that's what I love to do. And when I first I met you, gosh, as you said, 15 years ago, I watched you do a presentation for Professional Coaches and Mentors Association. I will never forget it. And there you are in your lab coat, doing your thing and entertaining the heck out of all of us. And I came up to you afterwards and I said, Henry, I don't know who you are, and you sure as hell don't know me, but somehow you and I are going to work together. And sure enough, we did. And one of the biggest gifts you gave me was when I came to you and said, okay, I want to do this book. You said, well, you got to tell me, what's the genre, Greg? You got to decide. Do you want it to be a big, thick tome that no one's going to read but looks good on your shelf? Or you want it to be something shorter and to the point and something that will grab people's attention? And you said to me, what are you really good at? And I said, Henry, I'm probably almost as good a BS artist as you are. So I can tell stories. He goes, there you go. There's a genre called the business fable. That's what you should do. And I said, Roger that, sir. And I said, do you have any examples? And you said 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I'm like, okay, let me look at that. And, you know, Ken Blanchard's office called the other day, said, you know, you kind of copied our book. Well, not really. But at the end of the day, I think I wrote a cracking good story. And that was my intention, was to write that cracking good story first and then worry about the teaching points and the leadership lessons and all that afterwards. And so that was really my goal in ensuring that if you picked up my book, you would want to find out what happened to the characters and the situations. And since it came out in 2016, that's exactly what a lot of people said. I love your book. I love the story. I love the characters. Oh yeah, and I learned something too. So I'm really happy with that. And now that the pandemic is starting to go away, I'm going back out on the road. I've been doing some keynoting just recently after 16 months. And when things get really good, I'll get the actors back together. I have a team here in San Diego, a team in LA, a team in Chicago, a team in New York, a team in London that aren't working, and we'll be working again when we get things back going, and we'll be doing more scenario-based training. We now, all the programs I lead feature the book. They either get it beforehand, hopefully, knock on wood, or they get it after, during the program. And so this is the route I've been on, and it's been a pleasure. It's been me talking about what matters most to me in a way that I feel really, really comfortable about it. And people are listening. People are hungry for understanding how powerful respect is and what we call respectful leadership, and how it can actually really drive performance and partnership and productivity in ways that a lot of people don't really think about. So that's the essence of what I do and what I love to do. And I'm just so blessed to have people like you in my life and coaching me. And that's me.
Maybe it'd be more respectful if I actually unmuted. My enthusiasm got the best of me. So, Gregg, thank you. I want to talk about respect, not your teaching. That's very fine. I want to talk about it as an author and professional speaker, how you pivoted off a topic that had been done to death.
Yes.
And you came in with the fresh thing, also with something more palatable to what we call the speech buyer, the person who's actually going to sign the check.
Yes.
That they could buy it. So could we talk about your evolution to respect?
Thank you very much for asking that question. When I left the work with the police department, and then I went overseas, and I did some of the work with police departments in the UK, and I got invited by an oil company, and I'm not sure if I should name them, but anyway, I got invited by an oil company to use our techniques, but they specifically wanted to focus on diversity and inclusion. And so that's where I first started to get a taste of that work. And then eventually, when I returned to New York, I did a lot more work in the diversity and inclusion world, and using the actors, using the lessons around that. The challenge was diversity in the 90s had already become politicized. And when I started talking to people and talking to people who hire the keynoters, they kind of looked at me. They would go, "Well, you're a straight white guy. How are you going to talk about diversity and inclusion?" And you know, I have to be gracious, and I have to help them understand that diversity and inclusion is not just about race and gender. It's about so many other things. And we have come to that point nowadays where we understand that more. But there was always this sense of, when I would walk into a room or walk on a stage, and the title somewhere in the conference or in my speech was diversity, there was just this barrier. And finally, I had a good colleague say to me, "You have to understand that no matter how sophisticated people are intellectually, in their gut, when they can't get their head around something, you've lost them. You will not be able to win them over. And no matter what your intellectual argument was." And then he said to me, "What do you really care about? If you could boil it all down to one thing, what do you care about?" And I said, "It's about respect." I quite frankly, it's been a struggle for me all my life in the theater. And then as a journalist, I certainly didn't get any respect. And as a consultant, yeah, maybe, but it was always a struggle for respect. He said, "Well, maybe that's what you are at your core." And I began to research it, and I realized that respect really does matter a heck of a lot to me. There aren't a lot of people talking about it, and there's certainly, Mary, I'm sure you would understand that around the neuroscience of it, nobody had done any studies on the neuroscience of respect until very recently. And now there's some fascinating data out there on the neuroscience of respect. So that's what I talk about now, and it's welcomed in every venue. No one ever says, oh, we don't want to talk about that here. Oh, that's politically correct. Oh, you're being, we don't hear from snowflakes. None of that. We don't get any of that when we talk about respect. Whereas diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are very, very important, those things have become politicized, but respect hasn't. And I love that about the work that I do. So thank you for asking that question.
Well, I want to talk more, but first I want you to share the story. And this goes back to little Gregg, I believe
yeah.
Long Island, little
Yes.
Gregg in Long Island,
Yeah.
and a first big lesson about respect.
It came when I was very young. You see, my dad was a sports writer for the New York Daily News. And we had a beautiful home on the North Shore of Long Island, what they call the Gold Coast. And one day when I was about 5 or 6, he says, look out the window because a limousine is coming to the house with a very important person. And sure enough, there comes the limousine, and out of the back seat comes this man, and he sees me in the window and he smiles and waves, and I smile and wave. And then my dad brings him into the house, and he invites him all the way upstairs. The house had 3 stories. He takes him right to the top where my dad had his office. And I was intrigued. So I followed them up the stairs, and I listened in while my father interviewed this man. And the guy was talking a mile a minute, and I didn't have an understanding of anything that he said. I just didn't know, but I was just captured by the way he spoke, the cadence, the energy, the intensity. And I must have sat there for 45 minutes without moving a muscle, just listening. And then at one point, the interview stopped suddenly. I heard my dad cussing. And even though he's a former Marine, he didn't cuss all that much, but at this time he did, because he had the machine he was using to record the interview. He was having trouble with it. Do any of you recall reel-to-reel tape recorders? That's what he was using at the time. And he finally got it working, and the interview came to an end, and the door opens, and there I am looking up at this guy. And he reaches down, and he says, hello, little man. And he shakes my hand. What's your name? And I said, Gregg. He says, well, it's pleased to meet you, Gregg. My name is Cassius Clay. And pretty soon people like your daddy are going to call me Muhammad Ali. And I'm like, I'm 5 years old. So I'm like, oh, okay. And he says, what do you want to be when you grow up? You may have had, when you were a child, your parents may have had friends who asked you that question. And I knew my dad was a writer. So I said, I want to be a writer like my daddy. He says, good for you. Do you like people? And I'm like, yeah, I like people. He goes, but are you curious about people like Curious George the monkey? Now, I knew Curious George the monkey, and I think they're still popular to this day, those books, and there's cartoons. And so I immediately said, yes, I'm curious about people like Curious George the monkey. He goes, well, good for you. Then let me give you a piece of advice, little man. And my father never tired of reminding me that Muhammad Ali said this to me when I was 5 years old. He leaned over and he said, you respect yourself, little man, and you respect other people, and you'll do okay. Pretty cool. And that was my first introduction to the whole concept of respect.
Well, so were you born in 1960?
How did you know?
You said you were 5, and in 1965 is when Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali.
Correct. He had won the Golden Glove. I think they call it Golden Glove. Yeah, for boxing.
Yeah, the Olympic gold medal,
Olympics.
1960 in Rome.
That's right.
And then goes back to Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
And can't get served at a restaurant.
Yep.
And he was like, wait a minute, I'm an Olympic champion.
This doesn't compute.
Yeah. And some other things. If you look back on some of those interviews, and he was at the time, what's the word, villainized?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then you read it today as like, this was profound and ahead of his time and speaking out on these things. But with that, but if you listen to it, it's actually with respect.
Yes.
Even on these interviews, he
Yes.
didn't. He had every right to be righteously indignant over his life.
Yes. He became a friend of the family. He was out at the house, once a year, twice a year. Sometimes we would have parties and events and stuff. And so I kind of knew him as I grew into my teenage years. And my dad knew him quite well and was his PR guy for his very last fight. And so there's still, if you Google Gene Ward, that was my dad's name, and Muhammad Ali, a picture will come up with the two of them shaking hands, and it's got Ali's signature. It's really cool. It's really, really cool.
Well, other than a cool story, which it was, I just wanted to bring it back to everybody about the power of that story. We were all, hanging on it, and how Gregg told it. He didn't give away the punchline too early. You were kind of like, well, who is this person?
Right.
Didn't drop too many clues till you got it. And it's like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. You're like, what? We're going in this direction now?
Yeah.
So, oh, by the way, out on Long Island, did you live in East Egg or West Egg? That's a great Gatsby reference, folks.
It is indeed. I did live on the North Shore, very near to where all the Gold Coast houses were.
Sure.
Ours was kind of a starter mansion, but still, it was
the
Gold
But you
Coast.
were there near Daisy and Nick.
I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I came a few decades after they did.
Okay.
So, in
Good
fact,
stuff.
there's a famous novel called The Gold Coast.
Oh,
By
believe I've heard it.
Nelson DeMille. And it is all about the little there's actually an unincorporated village in the town that I grew up in called Laddingtown. I grew up in Locust Valley, but Laddingtown is where I actually lived. And he set the whole novel in Laddingtown. And as I read it through, I'm going, oh my God, I know that place and that place and that place. And it's just, so he must have lived there too.
Great Neck, Little Neck, Cold Spring Harbor, Change at Jamaica.
Yeah.
Long Island Railroad.
You know it well. How do you know that so well?
How do I know anything? My best friend and best man, from college, lived in Great Neck. So I went to visit him, and I was just riding on that train with that conductor every day shouting that out. I was thinking like, okay, this is a good bit.
It is a good bit. It's legendary.
Okay, so what our authors want to know the most is, how do you get booked as a speaker? Not that it's incredulous that you get booked as a speaker, but what are the things you do? You're very successful at getting booked. You've learned a lot of things along the way. Gregg Ward was never discovered. Let everybody know that. He was not discovered and found. If somebody's door wasn't knocked on, I don't know how that oversight happened, because you've knocked on a lot of doors.
I did.
If you could just share
Sure.
your approach to it, you've been very successful.
Thank you very much. So very early on, I got involved in a partnership with an outplacement firm called Lee Hecht Harrison. You all may have heard of them. They were doing in California. I first moved out here, $5,000 in my pocket. That's all I had. No home, no nothing, and a 4-year-old child. They were doing what they called their quarterly breakfasts for all of their clients. And these were big corporations, and there were HR folks and all those. My sweet spot. That's my sweet spot. And we got into a partnership where, because I was using actors, I would talk about the concepts, and then the actors would come out. We would do our thing. We were sexy. We were hot. We were cool. This was back in the late 90s when nobody was doing this, certainly in California. And so we were the hot ticket. And very quickly, big companies, Nissan Motor Corporation, Pfizer, just huge companies saw me and my actors do our thing, and they said, "Can you come do it for us?" And so we always said yes, and we always worked out, the costs. And we also made sure our deal included, we want to videotape everything. We want to take photographs. We must have permission to do that. So we always got tons of content, and then I just went nuts on speakers bureaus. I just went from one to another. I called them. I begged them. I said, I'm going to send you tapes. I'm going to send you whatever I've got. My earlier book that I self-published, I would send them that. And over time, people said, okay, this guy's got something different. So I'm very much a niche player in that regard. And so, because this is not me boasting, just reality, because I was a professional actor and I've been on many stages in front of huge audiences for years, I'm comfortable up on stage. I tell stories and people like it. So that came across in the videos. And pretty soon I had speakers bureaus referring me. And I was starting to get booked not only to do keynotes, but also to do with the actors. And one of our biggest was doing the entire Harley Davidson corporate headquarters and then all dealerships all over the world. It was a huge contract that came as a result of a speakers bureau. So I'm only working with a couple right now, but there was a time where I was kind of pitching to all of them. No one was willing to sign me. And quite frankly, I wasn't willing to sign with one because, you know, the speakers bureau's business is a tough business. And also I was getting a lot of referral work. I was getting a lot of my clients saying to their colleagues, they'd go to an HR conference and said, you gotta talk to Gregg. He does this thing. He's got actors. He's really good. And so I got a lot of referral business out of being seen and just doing it over and over and over again.
What was the percentage that the Speakers Bureau was taking?
Oh, did you have to ask that? My whole afternoon is shot now. It could be as much as 35 to 40%.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's on the high side. 20 is low. So the range is 20 to 40.
Correct.
And there are certain stages you can't get on unless you have that relationship.
It's true. It's true.
So I'll take 60% of something rather than 100% of nothing.
I'm with you on that. And that was always my approach. I'm like, thank you for the work. Let's make this work. And, you know, that's the cost of doing business, but also they're doing all the marketing. And they're also, one of the other things I learned, it's always best to have someone else pitch for you rather than as a speaker, rather than you pitching for yourself. I don't know quite why that's true. Maybe Henry, you understand why that's true, but
I have studied that. You saying how great you are versus a third party saying how great you are, total different psychology.
yeah.
And then when the Speakers Bureau says, well, I'm sure I can get you a phone call with Gregg about it, then you can come on and you're not, what do you want to say? You're not this way anyway, but none of us want to be arrogant on that.
Right.
However, one of my mentors in this business said, what if it was easy to get an appointment with you? People could talk to you whenever they wanted. What message would that send? I said, it would send that I have no clients and no work. They said, exactly. So there's got to be a little, oh, let me try to get on Gregg's schedule. Let me see if something opens up next week. I heard one speaker, the first time he got offered a paid speaking engagement, he says, what's the date? So he's shuffling through an empty calendar book. Well, look, I'm available. He didn't just say, yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's like when you're negotiating, you're selling your car. They say, well, how much are you asking? And you say, well, $5,000. Okay, let me write you a check. You go like, oops, wrong number. Went a little too low there. And then also you don't want to go too high because then that just ends the deal.
Right.
So
Right.
They know the market, they have the contacts. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of improv here, Gregg. Yes, and you didn't sign an exclusive with anybody, so your referrals, you didn't have to hand that over.
Correct. Correct.
That is the warning, everyone.
Yeah.
If you sign an exclusive, then whoever books you, they get their 20 to 40%.
It's true. It's true. Even if they don't do any work for the gig. And now Chris had a great question and I wanted to respond to it. He was asking about, and for an example, how you put together a session for companies. And very typically, I've been able to say, hey, I customize everything. Everything I do is customized. Now, is that 100% true? Of course not. There's a lot of content that I pull off the shelf, but I do work very hard in advance to sit down with the client and a couple of people, at least 2 or 3 from their organization, who can give me different perspectives. I want to learn how people talk. I want to learn the culture so I can build it into my programs so that it truly is customized. For example, when I write scenarios, yes, I kind of know there's about 20 different scenarios that I can call upon at the drop of a hat, and then I can change the language, you know, the jargon that they use at the company. I can change sort of some cultural references, and there you have a customized script. So I always charge a development fee. I always charge a development fee, and that's because they need to know that I'm working in advance. I got to cast actors. I got to rehearse with them. I got to write scripts. I got to put all this stuff together. It's not like I just, you know, when I keynote, I sometimes will waive the development fee because I'm doing my shtick. But when it's a program for the company that's going to roll out over the course of time, there's a lot of advanced effort that goes into it. So I charge a development fee, which is usually around anywhere from 10 to 25% of the overall contractual fee.
Okay. Now, Greg, I heard that you're going to be offering a free gift today. What's that?
That is an electronic version of the Respectful Leader, which we have had prepared just as a gift to all our friends and fans and members of our community. So what we're asking, if people will go to our website, the respectfulleader. The book's website is respectfulleader.com, but I'd like you to go to our organization's website, the Center for Respectful Leadership, which is respectfulleadership.org. respectfulleadership.org. Sign up for our community. A big box pops up and says, join our community. So we'd like you to sign up. And the first 5 folks who do so will get a electronic version, PDF version of my book.
That should work. Thank you very much. Generous. And what a great example of how to do it, of how to make that offer, do it. So let's do some, let's deconstruct the magic trick. So you could have just sent a copy of the book, but this way, what is your strategy and thinking behind bringing us to a website?
Well, by bringing you into the website and having you join the community, you then access a whole bunch of other content. The idea being that if you're interested in the book, it's likely you're going to be interested in our all of our recordings. We interview all of our members of our advisory council, which are a really diverse, wonderful group of people who talk about their work in respect. And so you get a plethora of content essentially for free. And then if you continue to be interested, and we gently encourage you to take a look at our new online programs. We just finished a whole suite of programs on respect and respectful leadership. They were designed by the same designers and creators who did Facebook's in-house and Google's in-house training internal e-learning programs. And they are wonderful and interactive, and they're really inexpensive. And so we find that when folks, first we give them the book, we give that book away and get in return for joining the community. And then we gently introduce them to all of our content. We introduce them to e-learning. And what happens then is they like what they see, they like what they get. And then eventually they contact us and say, hey, can you bring your programs, your live programs to us? And during COVID, we transformed everything to virtual. So I've done a ton of virtual training throughout COVID. My business actually expanded during COVID, which we were all shocked. We were all stunned that it really picked up. But I won 2 new major corporate clients during COVID. So 2 or 3 days a week, every week, I'm delivering programs, or members of my staff are delivering programs. So that's kind of the progression. We never pitch hard. We never sell hard. It's always just, hey, take a look at these. These might interest you. And it's very, very organic. I think my marketing person will say to me.
I like that. It's very organic. You also use the word gentle.
Yes.
So none of this, what we're talking about, is hard sell. It's something better. It's law of attraction.
Yes.
It's put it, or as we used to say on the farm, just put the sugar cubes on your palm, just hold it up.
Yep.
They'll
The
come
horse,
to you.
the horse will lick them out of your hand. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and people like you and me are smart enough to figure out if this is in our best interest to get more involved.
Yes.
Or we call it the ladder. So you're just giving them a ladder or a staircase that they can climb. And however high they want to climb on Gregg's staircase is great with Gregg. And if they're not becoming a client, they can become an advocate, a referral source, somebody that leads somebody to the publicity. There's just all these wonderful things that can happen when you're the opposite of a pitch fest type approach, the pitch fest strategy. And certainly Gregg has the chops and the talent. He could be on the pitch fest circuit and sell some product for $4.97 today and today only. And if you don't buy it, you're a loser.
I have been to those when I started out, and I was so turned off by that. I said to myself, that is the last thing I'm ever going to do. I'm never going to do that. I'm going to be organic about it and just put my message out there, see if it resonates with folks. And certainly during the last 2, 3, 4 years, it has resonated. I've done a lot of TV interviews in Washington, D.C., and because I do a lot of work on the East Coast, and they're always saying, this was during the prior administration, they're always saying, hey, can you send this over to the White House? And my response is, well, we did, we got no response. So at the end of the day, there's a hunger out there. There's a real hunger for respect and an understanding of how effective it is. And so we're just trying to help people out. I told my wife recently, I said, I've always just wanted to make a difference in the world. I know that sounds kind of wishy-washy, but I've always wanted to make a positive difference in the world. I never set out to become a millionaire. And she goes, oh, now you tell me.
Yes.
But at the end, we're very happy here in lovely Little Mesa. And we have a great little home and a great community. And we don't have to be these, swimming in hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not what life's about. If you can end your career saying I made a difference around respect in people's lives, then I'm going to be really happy with that.
It did get you to Abu Dhabi, though.
It got me to Dubai.
Dubai.
Yes. Nonstop on Emirates in first class, no less, because I said, I'm not flying 16 hours in business class. And the client said, okay, it's Dubai. They've got more money than sin there. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. And they said, sure, we'll fly you over. And that was eye-opening. That was incredibly eye-opening. So I've been so fortunate. And again, you played a role in that, Henry. So I'll always be grateful to you.
Wow. And you have been. We used to do our retreats in La Jolla. Yep. And Gregg was always, okay, you need me for 15 minutes. I'm coming down. I'm doing 15 minutes. Not because it was building his brand or anything like that. 12 people in a room. That wasn't building his brand or anything like that. It came from a genuine spot of generosity.
Mm-hmm. I just like to give. I like to give. I like to help you out. You've helped me out so many times. So I like to help you out and help your authors out and your colleagues. Why not? What's wrong with that? I think it's the only way to live.
I think the more generous you are, the more nice things happen to you in life.
I think so.
Talking about being off-brand, respect in the last White House, and I'm not going political. As you were talking, though, I was thinking about, I was putting on a big conference in 2015, and to the board of directors, it was going to be in Atlanta, And I thought, okay, CNN's there, headline news. If I work it a little, I can probably get, a journalist. And for years, I've put on conferences at UC San Diego, and we would bring in Pulitzer Prize winners or the editor of Newsweek or something. And it was always a good draw. We did a lot of things with the Atlantic, and a great draw. And in 2015, people said, a journalist? Why would we want a journalist there? And these were well-educated people and, very successful in their career, but to a person, they were all just so anti-journalist. And I came up as a journalist, and I had to call the dean up at the university. I said, there's something happening out there. There's like a sea change happening right now. I just got to alert you to it, that what 2 years ago people thought was a great thing, now it's horrible. It was like 2015. The 2016 election hadn't happened fully.
Right.
So I think some of this was not creating a climate in America, was taking advantage of a climate that was already in America.
It was percolating. Absolutely. And when I worked as a journalist overseas, I was based in the UK. I didn't get respect there either because I was an American. And one quick final story. I was one day got a call when I was living in Scotland. I had a lot of editors there. One of my editors called me up and said in a thick Scottish accent, "I bet you Yankee don't know what's going on in Berlin, do you, laddie?" And I said, "Well, heck no, I know what's going on. The Berlin Wall's coming down." He said, "Oh, you do you? Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Heck yes, I want to go." So they sent me with my little Sony recorder and my little microphone, and I got on a hovercraft and 2 trains. One of them was an East German train, which barely rattled and rolled, and eventually ended up in Berlin, and the wall's coming down all over the place. And I was interviewing people on the East and the West side. And naturally, you would think the people on the East side were very excited about what's happening. And I thought, oh, the West folks in the West would be excited too. They were not excited at all. And I remember speaking to this one little old lady, and I said, "Do you happen on the West side?" And she was standing in front of a beautiful home. And I said, "Do you happen to have family on the East side of the wall?" And she said, "Yes. They're my first cousins." And I said, "Have you seen them since the wall went up?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Aren't you excited to see them?" And she spat on the ground. And she said, "No, they're communists. They're coming to take everything we have." And she meant it. And, it was at that point I went, wow, disrespect can divide families. And it really hit me that disrespect and respect are feelings. They're not cognitive, rational thoughts. They're feelings. And once we get our heads around that, then we can start to understand why we have such passions about each other and our tribes and all that kind of stuff. And so talking about respect from that perspective, most people go, oh, okay. And they're much more open to the message. And so I love to tell that story too, because I picked up a little piece of the Berlin Wall and I carry it with me wherever I go. And that's another thing on keynotes. If you've got props, y'all, props. Henry, you're the master of props. I have a Berlin Wall. I have something called my curse cushion, which it's gone missing for the moment, but it's a little cushion. And I talk to people. I say, "How many of you like to curse?" And a lot of hands go up. I said, "That's probably not respectful. So here, take the curse cushion, put it up against your mouth and let go." And we get a nice laugh out of that. And I own the URL. I'm going to make a fortune in selling curse cushions.
Cursecushion.com.
Exactly.
Greg, thank you so much for giving of your time and your wisdom with us today. We certainly all benefited from it and appreciate it.
Reach
Thanks
out to
everybody.
me, everyone. I'm happy to help. Reach out to me. I will talk to anybody anytime. If I can coach you and provide advice, just let me know. I'll send you a link to my calendar. We'll make it happen.
Very generous. Thanks everybody for attending the Marketing with a Book podcast, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye, everybody.